In the beginning of the 20th century, oppression and racism were challenged by courage, leadership, and dreams. Efforts were attacked brutally by a prejudiced America. After numerous failed attempts for justice, they looked to leaders of the race for motivation, guidance, and direction. This is the story of Madam C.J. Walker and her legacy of leading the African American race towards social advancement, independence, and equality. The period between 1890 to 1920, known as the Nadir era, saw disenfranchisement and destitution at every turn within the African American communities of the South. With blustering racial, cultural, and social prejudices guarding every door that opportunity knocked, African Americans had no choice but to resort to insufficient wage laboring, tenant farming, or sharecropping as Walker's family did. Stunting the economic growth of African American communities, these means of living perpetuated the slave labor system and virtually eliminated the possibility of social and economic ascent. Thrust into a chaotic world of subordination and poverty, Walker's strides in community building were certainly no easy feats.
Madam C.J. Walker was born Sarah Breedlove in 1867 on a plantation in Delta, Louisiana, where her parents had been slaves before the Civil War. And her early life was really bleak. By the time she was 7 years old, both parents had died. She got married at 14, she said, to get a home of her own because she was being abused by a cruel brother-in-law, as she described him. She became a mother at 17 and a widow at 20.
Moving to the infamous Badlands of St. Louis, Missouri in 1889 to seek better opportunities for herself and the young Lelia, Madam Walker slaved away as a launderer. Struggling to bear the weight of her economic burdens, Walker sought refuge in the St. Paul African Methodist Episcopal Church and planted the firm spiritual roots that enabled her to grow as a self-confident woman and foster the growth of those around her. Instilling in her a new sense of community and hope, Madam Walker joined the church's Mite Missionary Society and was forever awakened to the power of the world of philanthropy. Because of the lack of sanitation during the 1930s, Madam Walker's hair began to fall out, a common occurrence for African American women during that time due to stress, a poor diet, and mistreatment. After many long work hours, she finally perfected a formula that produced results. She began demonstrating her products door to door to the African American women in her community. In July of 1905, Walker moved to Denver to live with her family and escape competition in St. Louis. Invented, produced, and sold by a black woman, her products demonstrated that African American women could rely on themselves and on each other. Soon enough, she met her second husband, journalist C.J. Walker. They began advertising heavily in black magazines and newspapers of large cities such as Supreme in Reputation and Once a User, Always a User. When most ads of this era picture light-skinned women, she decided to use someone who would have best resembled her customers. Because of this, women were able to better picture themselves after the use of the product, as well as assimilate with an empowered African American figure and the monochromatic media that surrounded them. While her actions portrayed her determination to rise in the socioeconomic ladder, Walker's courage to contradict social and business norms received much criticism. Madam Walker hoped to use black churches as an advertising market because it was a central meeting place for the community. Clergymen condemned Walker's efforts to straighten hair to make them look white, and argued that women should stay the way God made them. Madam Walker rebutted that she did not try to straighten hair, but rather make women beautiful by whatever means possible. Prejudice in the early 20th century was rampant, and African American women often looked towards white women for beauty cues. Black-owned companies even produced and marketed products that encouraged customers to think white. After working tirelessly to promote her product, Madam Walker had succeeded in selling her products door to door by using her personal touch.
She developed a hair care product line, and then she trained thousands of other women who began to buy and sell her products. And by the time she moved to Harlem in 1916, she was one of the wealthiest and most successful African American entrepreneurs in the country.
In 1906, in an effort to expand her business, She left the mail-ordering business to her daughter and traveled exclusively to the South. Throughout the nation, Black women loved the new product that transformed hair treatment and the perception of African American beauty worldwide. Walker opened up several branches across the country. In Pittsburgh, she opened Lelia College, where she trained hair culturists to use and implement the Walker method. She began her work as a leader of the progression of African Americans and planted the seeds of her legacy.
She traveled door to door, town to town, teaching individuals in churches and in people's parlors and wherever she could. And she could see that ultimately it really wasn't as much about the hair care product, though that was important in an era when women didn't have access to those products, but it also was very much about empowering women and about helping women become economically independent.
She taught women how to be independent, about finance, and even encouraged them to build businesses of their own. In 1910, she opened another branch in Indianapolis, where she really began gaining national recognition and protesting against social and political issues of the day. Walker was able to unite her customers in a time when African American women were struggling to gain equality. Knowing that they could rely on each other gave them a sense of pride and changed their view on their role in America. Her work eventually gained recognition when The Crisis, a magazine for the NAACP, claimed that Walker influenced the personal habits and appearances of millions of human beings. She continued to fight for feminist advancement throughout her career, which was most notably demonstrated at the National Negro Business League Convention. After being denied to speak by Booker T. Washington, Walker spoke anyway to portray her discouragement of gender discrimination. In front of the many nations' great leaders, Walker defied what many thought of a woman. Given the chance, Walker took action to speak to influential people who she could convince that women's equality was of great need. Madam Walker's wealth allowed her to make large contributions to organizations that supported philanthropic and educational efforts for African Americans. She was recognized at the 1918 National Association of Commissions for Women Convention as the largest contributor to the colored YMCA building and the saving of Frederick Douglass's Anacostia home. To support African American soldiers fighting in World War I, she donated money and knitted clothes for organizations that sent care packages overseas. In her will, she left $100,000 to build a school for girls in Africa. She donated to the Tuskegee Institute and spent time speaking to students after their religious studies. Walker's most noteworthy political involvement was her support for anti-lynching legislation. She continued the work of Ida B. Wells and donated $5,000 to the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People anti-lynching campaign. The 1917 East St. Louis race riots encouraged her to do more than contribute money. In 1916, a great migration of African Americans from the rural South moved to the urban Northeast, Midwest, and West to escape segregation. Tensions finally maximized, resulting in the murder of several dozens of blacks. In response, Walker took up a position on the New York branch of the NAACP and organized the Silent Parade, where over 10,000 African Americans marched hand in hand up 5th Street in Harlem in peaceful protest of lynching and anti-black violence.
After this silent protest parade, she and a group of Harlem leaders traveled to Washington, D.C., hoping to meet with President Woodrow Wilson to persuade him to support legislation that would make lynching a federal crime. So she wanted to use the power of these hundreds of African American women who were her sales agents to speak out on political issues of the day to make a difference to race consciousness. When I look at her life, I think it's fabulous that she became a millionaire. Stunning that she became a millionaire. But for me, the more lasting legacy is that she empowered people and that she used her money to make a difference in her community and to show other people their ability to make a difference in their communities.
Her work transformed hair, society, and politics, and her accomplishments and efforts in uplifting the African American people through political activism, the expansion of the female workplace, and the promotion of African American cultural pride have taken immense progressive strides towards social and cultural unification and have truly exemplified her leading role within the African American community, as well as attributed to the formation of her legacy of Black advancement and pride.